Alright everyone, today I will be doing a build video for Tom Clancy's The Division centering on Tactician, the 5-piece bonus, Savage Gloves, and a crit-based AR setup for hybrid damage and survivability. It's a very efficient build, much more efficient than many other non-6-piece classified builds I've already done on the channel, and I hope that all of you enjoy it. Taking a look at Tactician's authority, we can see the 2-piece bonus is skill haste, the 3-piece bonus is skill power, and then the 4-piece bonus, every bullet you hit enemies with adds 1% bonus skill power, every bullet your deployed skills hit enemies with adds 0.2% bonus skill power, and skill power bonus is maxed at 30% and consumed on skill use. That, I believe, is the most important part of the entire gear set. The 5-piece bonus is some additional skill haste and skill power, but the 6-piece bonus is far too conditional. You need to do too many things, and it is only active in a specific rotation, and honestly, I believe it to be a terrible classified gear set for its 6-piece. So the 4-piece you will be using perfectly in this build to max out your crit on an assault rifle, thus dealing tremendous amounts of damage, and that's the important thing to consider. Now, you do not need to have the 5-piece bonus. A viable alternative is to run the vigorous chest piece. You'll get a lot of utility out of that. However, if you do have 5-piece classified with Savage Gloves, that's the way to go. Now we can jump right into the actual specifics of the gear. The main stat composition is going to be 1 piece of stamina, 1 piece of electronics, and 3 pieces of firearms. It doesn't matter which pieces are which. As long as you maintain that ratio, you'll be able to unlock all of your weapon talents regardless of the slot that they are in. For the backpack, there is a very specific major attribute, and that is health. Pound for pound, that's the best thing to be rolling. For a minor attribute, it doesn't really matter. You can have ammo capacity, that's a good quality of life roll, or you can have burn resistance, shock resistance, or disrupt resistance. Specifically, shock resistance can come in very, very handy, but burn is fine as well. Next up, we have our one high-end piece, which is the Savage Gloves. Now, there's a little flexibility here. If you can find crit elsewhere on the build, which there's not very many locations in which you can, but maybe you can have a different weapon talent or something. I'll discuss that in just a few minutes here. You can re-roll critical hit chance to skill haste. That will also have a good impact on the versatility. However, the best 3, in my opinion, are assault rifle damage, critical hit chance, and critical hit damage with the Savage talent. Next, we have our holster, and I have opted for the major attribute of critical hit chance. Yet again, if you can find crit elsewhere on the build, even though it is very hard to do so, I've pretty much found all the different rolls that you can have, then you can switch this over to skill haste, but in my situation, 4% critical hit chance is the way to go. Next up is the knee pads, and this is kind of in the same boat as the backpack. You want a major attribute of health, pound for pound. That's the best thing to roll here. For minor attributes, it's great to have shock resistance. If you want to increase the power in PvE specifically and ignore PvP, then you do need to have damage to elites as a minor attribute. But if you don't have it and you're only focusing on player versus player combat, then it doesn't really matter. Look for as high a main stat as possible and health as a major attribute. Next up, we have our mask, and this is fairly straightforward. There's not very many things to roll that are better than critical hit chance, so I would suggest that there. And for a minor attribute, damage to elites, again, there's nothing more competitive in that slot. Last up, we have our chest piece, and this one is pretty rigid as well. You have 9% skill haste and about 15 to 16,000 health. These are very good, pound for pound, and there's nothing that can compete with them. You aren't going to be rolling exotic damage resilience here because that really is only effective if you have a lot of it, and there's no other slot that you can roll EDR without sacrificing build functionality, especially the crit, and you wouldn't be able to meet crit chance cap. So skill haste, health, ammo capacity. It's important to have ammo capacity on either the chest piece or the backpack, not necessarily both, so I have it on one slot here. Next is gear mods, and there is a little bit of flexibility here depending on what slot your weapon talents are in. Now, depending on the slot, you may need to have about 4,800 stamina. If you do, then roll 3 stamina mods with critical hit chance and slot those in. That's if Unforgiving is not in the 3rd slot. Then I have opted for electronics mods with critical hit chance. It is important to have the 5% total increased crit chance from having 1% on every single gear mod. And the electronics meshes really well with the Tactician's authority because that gives a flat skill power boost, which means the higher your intrinsic skill power, the better that bonus will activate, the more effective that bonus will be. So I have opted for 3 stamina mods with critical hit chance on the chest piece and the mask, and then 2 electronics mods with critical hit chance on the knee pads and the backpack. That, however, is a little bit flexible. You can opt for firearms, you can have all electronics mods if you don't need the stamina, etc., but always have critical hit chance as the minor on all of the different mods. For performance mods, it's very important to have all pulse critical hit chance. These will drastically increase the amount of damage that you're dealing, and you are going to be using pulse as a core skill in the build, so pulse critical hit chance in all of your different performance mod slots. Moving on to our weapon, you can see responsive, competent, and unforgiving. I do believe that these are the 3 best weapon talents in the game in combination for a damage build. And since I do have unforgiving in the 3rd slot where it is free, I do not need to have 4,800 stamina. However, were it to not be in the last slot, this build would still be able to activate the gun talent. Another thing, competent requires only 3,800 electronics, so you do not need to run 4,600 like I am right here. However, I would advise it. This is one of the only super effective hybrid builds that I've been able to craft or ever seen in the game in its current state. A lot of builds are running very specialized setups with all firearms or all stamina, etc. This one is well-rounded and performs a lot of roles super well. So responsive, competent, and unforgiving, though it doesn't matter the order that the talents are in. For weapon mods, it's a little bit more rigid than other competing builds. You do need a decently large magazine with over 100% mag size, and then 3% critical hit chance. You need critical hit damage on the underbarrel, an additional 3% critical hit chance on your muzzle, and critical hit damage as a major, and then critical hit damage yet again, and at least 2.5%, preferably 3% critical hit chance on your scope. Moving over to character sheet, we're going to examine what all of this has done and talk about the skills as well in just a second here and how they combine. So critical hit chance with our assault rifle is sitting at 27.5%. That's quite high. Critical hit damage is at 96%. But when you combine that with the amount of crit that you get to targets out of cover, which is almost always going to be active in PvP of 7% from Savage, you then are up at 33.5% critical hit chance on an assault rifle. Now we need to move over and take a look at our pulse skill. On the pulse, you can see that we have 21.8% critical hit chance. That's because of our performance mods and because of the Tactician's Authority base skill power boost. Now, this is without stacking and actively shooting targets and beefing up our skill power with Tactician's Authority 4-piece. If you do stack up Tactician's Authority 4-piece, as I will demonstrate right now, to anywhere between 10 and 15 stacks, or maybe even a little over at about 17, you will then see that pulse critical hit chance is 24.3%. If you combine that with the amount of crit that you're getting from Savage Gloves at 7% and the native crit on your weapon from all of your mods and your gear major attribute rolls, you will be meeting right about there 60% critical hit chance with an assault rifle, which is extremely powerful. Not to mention the fact that you also get about 20-ish critical hit damage without stacking fully on Tactician from the pulse, so you will be critting very often and for very large amounts with your assault rifle. Also, Tactical Scanner does increase your weapon damage against targets that remain pulsed, and not a lot of people are running Conceal, the modifier on pulse that would then, or Scrambler rather, which would conceal you from enemy pulses. Not a lot of people are running that. Also, nobody's running the Smart Cover with the Conceal modifier, so they are not mitigating your pulse in any way, and you will most of the time be able to have this active on enemy players. Not 100% of the time, but pretty close to it. My second skill is Booster Shot. I think it's a no-brainer to run this here. It has decent healing at 93,000. After a few Tactician stacks, you can get that even higher if you stack up to 30%. And it does increase weapon damage and damage mitigation for a very long duration of 15 seconds when you're popping it. So you have a 50-50 uptime with a 30-second cooldown on having 15% increased damage, 7.5% increased mitigation, and really, honestly, it's a no-brainer. Booster Shot is the best option to run here. For talents, I have opted for On the Move. This is a run and gun build, so you'll get a lot of value out of that. One is None, because you will be aiming for the head whenever possible. You get really great damage there. And there's not that many other competing talents that can slot in where One is None could go. Strike Back, that's very, very powerful when paired with Unforgiving, which is on your weapon, and the cooldown reduction doesn't hurt at all. And then Critical Save, that's integral to any build. The 20% increased mitigation from a medkit in the last health segment is not only easy to proc, it is also super powerful and will save your life. For gameplay, I have some skirmish material here. It was performing super well in the Dark Zone. It works really great with a team. It works good solo, has decent survivability, has very, very high damage. But this is just some of the easiest material that I had. I used it on the live stream, and I'll probably use it again in the near future. But to talk about the mechanics of the build, you are using a pulse, and a lot of players are not defending against that pulse. So when you are using it, you have increased base weapon damage. You are meeting the 60% critical hit chance cap. You have very high body shot damage. You have very high crits if you hit headshots. Again, just boost the efficiency even further. It's exceptionally powerful, and you can keep Competent and Booster Shot active a majority of the time, because Tactician's Authority can give you up to 30% increased skill power, on top of the fact that you are hybrid and you do have increased skill power from your base electronics rolls. You're able to have these situational talents active the majority of the time rather than just relying on them for burst. It's very strong. It doesn't need to have 5 pieces of Tactician's Authority. You can swap out for Vigorous, which, if anything, might even increase the value of the build and the survivability even further. But if you have 5 pieces, that's fine. You do just need the Savage Gloves. Combining all of these things to have a crit AR that has well over 100% increased critical hit damage if they are not concealed or not using the Scrambler mod, because you have 96% and then you're getting an additional 20+% from Pulse. Combine that with the fact that you have 60% critical hit chance on an assault rifle, and you have a build that performs exceptionally well. When you're landing the headshots, as you can see, you're dealing highly competitive damage. I was taking this against strikers in the Dark Zone and many other builds like Predator's Mark or Nomad, and I was defeating them in a very, very decisive way. So the build performs. Thank you for watching. Before tuning out, I would ask that everyone consider supporting on the Patreon page. YouTube is not a reliable source of income for a full-time creator. YouTube is all over the place, and you never know, there's zero job security there. So consider the Patreon. There's some cool rewards there. The link is down in the description below. Also, check out the website. Great group of gamers there. Check out the Facebook group. The Upper Echelon Network is expanding. And as always, thank you for watching, and have a nice night.